The sky over West Texas had been lying all afternoon. It started as a bruise, a low, greenish smear along the horizon that Margaret Calloway had noticed somewhere around Merkel, maybe 20 miles back, when the land had flattened out completely and there was nothing between her and the edge of the world except dry grass, fence posts, and the occasional oil pump nodding slowly like a tired old man. She had told herself it was nothing. She had told herself a lot of things over the past 3 months that turned out to be wrong. "Mom." Lily's voice came from the passenger seat, flat and careful in the way she had learned to speak since February. "That looks bad. I see it. I'm just saying, Lily, I see it." The 2009 Ford F-150 rattled across a seam in the asphalt, and something beneath the hood made a sound that did not belong, a thin, metallic knock that had been growing louder since Lubbock. Margaret gripped the wheel tighter. The truck had been her husband's, and before that, it had belonged to his father, and it carried the particular stubbornness of things that had outlived their usefulness, but refused to admit it. She understood that quality intimately. The temperature gauge crept toward the red. "Mom, I know." She pulled off onto the shoulder just as the first drops hit the windshield, fat, heavy drops that splattered wide and left dust rings on the glass. The sky behind them had gone the color of a cast-iron skillet. In the distance, the flat land was already disappearing behind a gray curtain of rain moving fast and sideways. Margaret turned off the ignition and listened to the engine tick. 44 years old. A widow since February 14th, Valentine's Day, because the universe had a sense of humor that she had stopped finding funny. $260 in her checking account. A truck that was overheating on a county road outside Abilene, Texas, with a storm bearing down, and her 17-year-old daughter sitting next to her in a hoodie and earbuds she hadn't taken out in 3 days. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and breathed. "It's going to be okay," she said. She wasn't sure who she was telling. Lily said nothing. Through the windshield, the rain hit. It came hard and fast the way Texas's storms do, not building up politely but arriving all at once, like it had been waiting just over the ridge and finally lost patience. Within 2 minutes, the visibility had dropped to nearly nothing. The windows fogged. Lily pulled her knees to her chest and stared at the white-gray wall of water beyond the glass. In the bed of the truck, under a blue tarp that Margaret had tied down in Ohio 3 weeks ago, were the remains of a life, 2 suitcases, a box of kitchen things, Lily's art supplies in a plastic bin, a quilt that had belonged to Margaret's mother, and a banker's box full of documents she had spent the last months of her marriage not understanding, and the first months of her widowhood learning to understand all too well. Debt. Her husband, Dennis Calloway, had died of a heart attack at 47, sitting in his recliner on Valentine's Day with a beer in his hand and a basketball game on television. And he had left behind $41,000 in credit card debt that Margaret hadn't known about, a second mortgage that had been quietly suffocating them for 2 years, and a life insurance policy that had lapsed 6 months earlier because he had stopped paying the premiums and hadn't mentioned that either. She had sold the house in March. It cleared the second mortgage and most of the credit cards and left her with a little over $8,000 after fees. She had put $3,000 into an account for Lily's eventual college. She had used some of it to pay the last 2 months of Lily's therapy. And then she had packed the truck and pointed it south and west because her cousin in Scottsdale had a spare room and had said, on the phone in April, "Come on down, we'll figure it out." And that was the closest thing Margaret had to a plan. She had not called the cousin since leaving Ohio. She wasn't entirely sure the offer still stood. But Scottsdale was still 400 miles away, and right now she was parked on the shoulder of a county road in a rainstorm with an overheating truck. And those 400 miles might as well have been 4,000. "There's a gate," Lily said. Margaret lifted her head. Through the passenger window, barely visible in the rain, a metal ranch gate stood maybe 30 yards ahead, framed by 2 stone pillars. Beyond it, a gravel drive disappeared into the gray. A sign on the gate read, "Colton Ranch Private Property, Nitrogen Monoxide Trespassing." Margaret stared at it for a long moment. "Stay here," she said. "Mom, it's pouring, I know. Stay here." She pushed open the door, and the rain hit her like a wall. She was soaked through before she reached the gate, her hair plastered flat, her flannel shirt heavy as a wet blanket, her sneakers filling with water from the grass along the shoulder. She grabbed the gate with both hands and looked down the gravel drive. Maybe a quarter mile ahead through the curtain of rain, she could make out the dark shape of a structure, a barn, big and long, with a metal roof. Beyond it, further back and higher up on a slight rise, the lights of a house burned through the gray. Someone was home. Margaret stood at the gate in the rain and did the kind of calculus that desperation teaches you. She was a 44-year-old widow from Ohio with $260, a broken truck, a traumatized teenager, and a storm that showed no sign of stopping. Pride was a luxury. She had been liquidating her luxuries for months. She went back to the truck. "There's a ranch," she said, water dripping from her chin onto the seat. "House and a barn. I'm going to go ask if we can wait out the storm." Lily looked at her. "It says no trespassing." "I saw that. Mom, it'll be fine. Grab your jacket." The gravel drive was half an inch of standing water by the time they walked it, and the rain was so loud on the metal barn roof that Margaret could feel it more than hear it, a continuous percussion that rattled in her sternum. She knocked on the barn side door 3 times before it opened. The man who opened it was not what she expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested decades of physical work rather than a gym. Wide through the shoulders and thick in the forearms, the sort of man who had been strong so long he no longer thought about it. He was somewhere in his early 50s, with close-cropped silver hair, a jaw that needed a shave, and eyes the color of creek water, a gray-green that caught the barn's interior light and gave very little back. He wore a dark canvas work jacket, jeans, and boots, and he was holding a lantern because the power was already out. He looked at Margaret. He looked at Lily. He looked back at Margaret. He said nothing. "I'm sorry to bother you," Margaret said. Water was running down her face. "Our truck broke down out on the county road. I think it overheated. We've got nowhere to go until the storm passes, and She stopped, took a breath. "Can we wait somewhere? Even the barn would be fine." "We won't touch anything. We'll be gone as soon as it clears." The man studied her with an expression that was not unkind, but was not warm either. It was the expression of someone doing an assessment. "How'd you get on my property?" he said. His voice was low and even, with the unhurried cadence of someone who had spent his life in places where there was no reason to rush words. "The gate was unlocked. I'm sorry. We didn't have many options." "Where are you from?" "Ohio." "We're heading to Arizona." He looked at Lily again. Lily looked back at him with the flat, measuring gaze she had developed since February, the gaze of someone who had decided to trust nobody new until further notice. The man stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," he said. The barn was warm in the way that large animal spaces are warm, not from any heating system, but from the accumulated body heat of living things, hay and leather, and the smell of horses and cattle and engine oil. 3 horses stood in stalls along the far wall, turning their heads at the newcomers with large, quiet eyes. A work table ran along one side, covered in tools. A single work light ran off a generator somewhere, casting a yellow pool across the concrete floor. "Sit," the man said, nodding toward a wooden bench near the work table. They sat. He moved to a shelf, pulled down 2 rough towels, the kind used for horses, and held them out without ceremony. Margaret took them. "Richard Colton," he said. He did not extend his hand. He just said it like he was filing the information. "Margaret Calloway. Maggie. And this is my daughter, Lily." Richard Colton looked at the girl. "How old?" 17, Lily said. "You eat?" Margaret blinked. "I'm sorry. Have you eaten?" "Today. We had something in Abilene when—" Margaret looked at Lily. Lily looked at the floor. It had been the gas station crackers around noon. It was now close to 7 in the evening. "A while ago," Margaret admitted. Richard Colton said nothing. He turned and walked to the back of the barn, through a door that presumably connected to a secondary structure. He came back 4 minutes later with a paper bag that he set on the work table without comment. Inside were 2 wrapped sandwiches, roast beef on thick bread, 2 bottles of water, and a bag of chips. "Eat," he said. He went back to whatever he had been doing before they arrived, which appeared to be some kind of repair on a piece of equipment in the corner. He worked with his back to them, and he did not make conversation, and the only sounds were the rain hammering the roof, the horses shifting in their stalls, and the methodical clank of his tools. Lily unwrapped her sandwich with the careful deliberateness of someone trying not to reveal how hungry she was. She ate half before she looked up. "Thank you," she said quietly to his back. Richard Colton paused for exactly 1 beat. He said, and kept working. Margaret ate and watched him and said nothing. She was good at reading people. She had spent 20 years being married to a man whose financial destruction of their life had happened entirely in plain sight, and she had missed it, which had shaken her faith in her own perceptions. But she found herself reading this man and finding something she didn't have an immediate name for. Not cruelty, not softness, something in between, something careful. Outside, the storm raged on. It was after 9 when the rain stopped. Margaret had dozed on the bench, Lily's head on her shoulder, the way they had slept in rest stops in cheap motels for the past 3 weeks. She woke to the absence of sound. The rain had cut off with the same abruptness with which it had arrived, and found the barn dim and still. Richard Colton was sitting on a hay bale across the space, not working, just sitting. In the lantern light, with the noise gone, he looked older and tireder than he had at the door. He was looking at nothing in particular. "It stopped," Margaret said softly. "Yes, we should go. Check on the truck." "I looked at your truck," he said. She sat up straighter. "What?" "Went out during the storm. Radiator hose. I've got one that might fit in the shop. I can put it on in the morning." Margaret stared at him. "You went out in that storm to look at my truck?" He shrugged, a minimal gesture, one shoulder. "I had to check the fencing anyway." "Mr. Colton, Richard." "Richard, I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask." He stood, picking up the lantern. The storm tore up the county road. "There'll be debris. You can't drive until morning anyway." He moved toward the barn door, then stopped and turned without looking directly at her. "There's a guest room in the house. Clean. Your daughter can have a proper bed." A silence opened up between them. Margaret felt something rise in her throat that she recognized as the precursor to crying, and she was absolutely not going to cry in front of this man she had known for 2 hours. She pressed it down hard. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Richard Colton looked at her, then really looked at her, with those gray-green eyes that were hard to read and maybe didn't want to be read. "My mother was a widow," he said. "She drove a truck that broke down a lot too." He pushed open the barn door, and the night air, washed clean by the storm, cool and smelling of cedar and wet earth, fluttered in. "Come on," he said, "it's late." What would happen next in that house, what would be said, revealed, and quietly rebuilt over the coming days, was something neither Margaret Calloway nor Richard Colton could have predicted standing at the threshold of that barn on a stormy Tuesday night in May. But the storm had stopped, and the gate had been open. And sometimes that is all it takes. The guest room had a window that faced east, and the morning came through it without apology. Margaret lay on top of the quilt. She had been too tired to get under it, and too cautious to feel fully at ease in a stranger's house, and watched the light change from black to gray to the particular pale gold of a Texas dawn. Somewhere outside, a rooster voiced its opinion about the hour. The house was quiet around her. She had slept in her clothes. She was aware, lying there, of exactly how she must look, hair tangled, face drawn, the specific hollowness that 3 months of sustained crises leaves around the eyes. She was aware, too, of the strangeness of being here, in a clean room with good furniture and thick curtains, in a house that clearly had money in it, belonging to a man whose name she hadn't known 12 hours ago. Down the hall, in the room Richard Colton had silently indicated with a brief nod, Lily was still asleep. Margaret had checked twice in the night. She sat up. On the small nightstand, someone had placed a folded clean towel and a bar of soap. She hadn't noticed that last night. She sat with that detail for a moment. What it meant about the kind of person who did that kind of thing. Not announcing it, not asking if it was needed, just placing it there. Then she got up and went to find coffee. The kitchen was large and functional in the way of working ranch kitchens, not decorative, not designed for entertaining, but organized with the precision that suggested a person who spent serious time in it. Cast iron on the stove, a butcher block counter worn smooth with use, a window above the sink that looked out over the ranch land and through it in the early morning light. Margaret could see the scale of the place for the first time. It was vast. Even from the kitchen window, the land rolled away in every direction, green gold pasture, heavy with last night's rain, dotted with cattle too distant to count. Fence lines ran straight to the horizon. Beyond the main barn, she could see another, larger outbuilding, and beyond that, a series of smaller structures she couldn't identify. A water tower, a bunkhouse, equipment yard with machinery that looked expensive and well-maintained. She was standing there, processing the scale of it, when Richard Colton came in from outside. He was already fully dressed and apparently had been working for some time. His boots were muddy. His jacket had a fresh tear at the elbow, and he was carrying a length of fencing wire. He set it on the back porch without tracking it inside, hung his jacket on a hook by the door, and washed his hands at the kitchen sink with the efficient unhurriedness of routine. "Coffee's on," he said without turning around. "I was just about to, already made." He dried his hands and took a mug from the cabinet, just one, and poured it and set it on the counter in front of her, and then poured his own and stood on the other side of the kitchen island and drank it. The gesture was so practical, so without ceremony, that Margaret found herself momentarily disarmed. Not kindness performed, just kindness done. "Thank you," she said, "for last night. The room, the food, all of it. I don't want you to think She stopped. "I'm not someone who usually—" "You don't have to explain," Richard said. "I want to." He looked at her over his mug. Waited. "We've had a hard few months," she said carefully. This isn't a pattern. I don't knock on strangers' gates." "I know," he said. "How do you know?" "Because you apologized 3 times before you asked for anything." He drank his coffee. "People who make a habit of taking don't do that." Margaret was quiet. Outside the window, a hawk was riding a thermal high above the east pasture, circling slow and wide. "I looked at the hose," Richard said. "It'll hold with what I've got. I can have your truck running by noon. The county road should be cleared by then. Let me help." He looked at her again with that assessment gaze. "You know trucks?" "Some. Dennis, my husband, he was always working on it." "I handed him tools for 20 years. Something shifted fractionally in Richard Colton's expression. "Dennis, he died in February." A pause. "I'm sorry. Thank you." Another pause, longer. He finished his coffee and set the mug in the sink. "I'll show you where the tools are," he said. Lily appeared at 9:30 in yesterday's clothes, hair loose, carrying her phone, and wearing the expression of someone who had slept 11 hours and wasn't ready to be grateful for it. She stood in the kitchen doorway and took in the room, the unfamiliar space, her mother at the kitchen table with a second cup of coffee. The absence of Richard Colton, who was back in the barn. "Where are we?" she said. "Colton Ranch, Texas. Mr. Colton is fixing the truck. How long are we staying?" "Until noon. Then we're back on the road." Lily crossed the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water from the tap and stood by the window. In the morning light, she looked younger than 17, not the guarded, carefully blank face she wore like armor, but something softer, sleep-mussed, and real. "It's a lot of land," she said. "I know. How much do you think it is?" "I haven't asked." Lily turned from the window. "Mom, last night, where were we going to go? If this hadn't been here." Margaret held her mug in both hands. "We would have figured it out." But what does that actually mean? What would we have actually done? It was the question Lily had been building toward for 3 weeks. Margaret could feel the weight of it, the specific gravity of a 17-year-old's fear-finding language. She had been waiting for it and dreading it. We would have called someone, Margaret said. A tow company. With $260, Margaret looked at her daughter. How do you know how much money I have? Lily looked back at her, steady and sad and 17. Mom, I know everything. I've known since March. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily, I'm not mad, Lily said, which Margaret suspected was not entirely true. I just think we need to stop pretending it isn't this bad. Because if we stop pretending, maybe we can actually fix it. Margaret set down her mug. She thought of Dennis and his private debts, his careful constructions of normalcy over disaster, and felt the nausea of resemblance. You're right, she said. You're completely right. I'm sorry. Lily nodded. She sat down across the table. What's in Scottsdale? Cousin Patricia. She said we could stay. Did you call her? Not since Ohio. Call her today. I will. Mom, I will. Today. I promise. Lily held her gaze until she was satisfied, and then she reached across the table and took a piece of toast from the plate Margaret had made and ate it without further comment. The conversation was over. They had begun. Richard Colton had 2 full-time ranch hands, Boyd Mercer, 58, built like a tree stump, a man of almost no words who communicated primarily in nods, and Caleb Sutton, 26, wiry and perpetually cheerful in the way of young men who have not yet accumulated enough suffering to reconsider it. Caleb was the one who appeared most surprised to find a woman handing Richard tools in the barn. Morning, he said, coming in from the equipment yard and stopping at the sight of Margaret. He took off his hat. Ma'am, Caleb Sutton. Didn't know we had company. Maggie Calloway. My truck broke down last night. The F-150 on the road. I saw it coming in. Old hose let go? Radiator hose, yes. Caleb looked at Richard, then back at Margaret with the alert curiosity of someone deciding whether a situation is interesting or alarming. He settled on interesting. You from around here? Ohio, long way from Ohio. Yes, Margaret agreed. Richard, who had been working steadily without acknowledging this exchange, held out his hand without looking up. 3/8, he said. Margaret found the wrench, placed it in his hand. He grunted. Caleb watched this interaction with visible delight, recognized that he was observing something he was not meant to comment on, put his hat back on, and went to find Boyd. At 11:50, the truck started. Margaret sat in the driver's seat and listened to it idle, smoothly, for the first time in weeks, and felt a complicated surge of emotion that she mostly managed to contain. She put it in drive and moved it a few feet and put it back in park and got out. Richard was wiping his hands on a rag. He had also, while she was testing the truck, repaired the tear in the tarp over the bed and resecured 2 of the tie-downs that had come loose. She hadn't asked him to do that. She hadn't been watching when he did it. How much do I owe you? She said. Nothing. Richard, the hose was on the shelf for 3 years. It's not losing me anything. Your time is my own. He folded the rag and set it on the workbench. You're good to drive. Margaret stood in the barn doorway. The day had come up bright and clear after the storm, the sky a hard, saturated blue, the air dry and smelling of cedar and damp earth, the kind of day West Texas produces as compensation for its weather. Out on the county road, she could see a county maintenance truck that had come through and pushed the storm debris to the shoulder. She was free to go. She should go. Scottsdale was still 400 miles away, and Patricia's spare room, if it was still available, was a real bed in a real place with a real plan attached to it, however fragile. She should go. Lily made a phone call, she said, to her school in Ohio about transferring transcripts. She's going to have to re-enroll somewhere in Arizona by fall. Richard said nothing. He didn't appear to be inviting her to continue, but he didn't move away either. We don't actually have a firm place to land in Scottsdale, Margaret continued, and the words cost her something, the way honest words often do. My cousin offered months ago, and I haven't confirmed it. I'm going to call her today, but I don't." She stopped. "I'm not sure it's going to work out." Richard Colton looked at her steadily. "I'm not telling you that because I want something," she said quickly. She shook her head. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." "Because you're tired of pretending it isn't this bad," Richard said. She looked at him sharply. He said it so flatly, so precisely, the exact words Lily had used that morning, that for a moment she thought somehow he had heard. He hadn't. He had just recognized it, the way a person does when they have pretended their own hard things for a long time. Margaret held his gaze. "Yes," she said. "Exactly that." A long beat of silence between them. "There's work here," Richard Colton said. His voice was careful, measuring each word like he was checking weight. "Housekeeping, mostly. Some cooking if the men are short-handed. Last woman who did it left in March. I've been managing, but..." He stopped. "It's not charity, it's a job. Comes with the room." The barn was very quiet. One of the horses shifted in its stall. "Room for two," Margaret said. "Room for two," Richard confirmed. She looked out at the road, then back at him. "I need to call my cousin," she said. "You can use the house phone, and I need to discuss it with Lily. That's reasonable. And I need to..." She stopped, looked at him directly. "Why are you doing this?" The question was the same one she had asked the night before at the barn door. He had answered it with his mother, with the broken-down truck. This time he was quiet for longer, and when he spoke, his voice had something different in it, a careful quality, as if he were being precise about something he was not accustomed to being precise about. "This ranch is a lot of land for one person," he said. "I built it to be more than it is." He picked up his rag again. "That's all." It wasn't all. Margaret was fairly sure it wasn't all. But she understood the nature of answers that are a beginning rather than a completion, and she decided to accept it for now. "Let me talk to Lily," she said. "I'll be in the south pasture," he said, and walked away. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the Ford F-150 was still parked in the barn. Margaret Calloway had called her cousin Patricia, and the conversation had been short and confirming in its own way. The spare room had, in fact, been reassigned to Patricia's daughter's college roommate 2 weeks ago, and Patricia was sorry she should have called. Things had been busy. Margaret had said it was fine. She had thanked her. She had hung up. And then she had sat on the guest room bed for a long time, running the numbers she knew by heart, looking out the east-facing window at the late afternoon light lying golden horizontal across the Texas pasture. And she had made the kind of decision that only looks brave from the outside. 3 weeks. It happened in stages, the way most significant things do, not in a single decision, but in a series of small practical steps that accumulated before Margaret had fully interrogated where they were leading. First, it was simply staying 2 nights because the county road had still had debris and the truck needed a day's rest. Then it was a week because Patricia's call had eliminated the plan and Margaret needed time to construct a new one. And in the meantime, she had begun cleaning the house with the focused energy of someone who needed something concrete to do with their hands. And Richard Colton had said nothing about the week, except thank you when he came inside to find dinner on the table for the first time in apparently months. Caleb Sutton's reaction to the dinner had been more enthusiastic. He had stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Ma'am, I don't want to be rude, but are you an angel?" and eaten 2 full plates of the chicken and rice Margaret had made from what was in the pantry. By the 3rd week, Lily had enrolled in the Abilene Independent School District, which required Margaret's permanent address, which she had given as Colton Ranch, Route 4, Taylor County, and that had felt like a thing of consequence, but she had written it without hesitation. Richard Colton's ranch, she was learning, was precisely as large as it looked from the kitchen window, and then some more. 4,300 acres, the largest cattle operation in the county, which was itself not a small county. He ran around 300 head of Angus, had 2 additional part-time hands who came in during peak season, and managed the whole operation with the quiet precision of a man who had built it from nothing and had never needed anyone to verify that it was impressive. He didn't perform the ranch, he just ran it. She learned this in pieces, the way you learn anything about a person who talks less than most from what the place itself said, from what Caleb let slip in the cheerful, unguarded way of young men, from what Boyd communicated through the careful hierarchy of his silences. Boyd, she had come to understand, respected Richard Colton above all other things, and was watching her with the specific vigilance of a man who protects what matters to him. The first week his nods had been minimal. By the second week he had begun leaving his coffee cup on the kitchen counter in the morning, which she understood was his way of acknowledging that she made it correctly. By the third week he had said, unprompted, "Good stew, Mrs. Calloway," and Caleb had nearly fallen off his chair. The thing that nobody talked about, that lived in the spaces of every conversation and the careful geography of shared rooms, was the simple fact of what Marguerite and Richard Colton were to each other. She was employed by him. She cleaned his house and cooked for his men, and was paid a fair wage in cash at the end of each week, which she put in a coffee tin in her room because she didn't yet have a Texas bank account and because old habits of careful saving had returned. She was his employee. He was her employer. This was clear and practical and true. It was also clearly not the whole story, and both of them knew it and treated the knowledge with the mutual respect of two people who have both been through enough to know that rushing things is not neutral, that it costs. He ate dinner at the table with her and Lily most evenings, not always, but most. He answered questions when asked about the ranch. He did not ask her much about Ohio, about Dennis, about the debts or the sale of the house or the specific geography of her losses. But he listened fully when she offered things, with the particular quality of attention that is rarer than it should be. The kind where you can feel that the other person is not preparing their response while you speak, but actually hearing. Lily watched him with the measuring eyes she watched everyone with, and she kept her conclusions to herself. Margaret, who had learned to read her daughter across the full range of those silences, believed the conclusion was tentatively positive. One evening, the 10th day, Margaret came into the living room to find Lily sitting on the far end of the couch from Richard Colton, showing him something on her phone. She stopped in the doorway. Richard was leaning slightly forward, looking at the screen. Lily was explaining something with her hands, which she only did when she actually cared about the subject. Margaret did not go in. She stood in the hallway and felt something shift in her chest, not a tearing, but a mending. The small sound that something makes when it begins to close. On the 20th day, Richard Colton drove to Abilene for ranch supplies and came back with a box from an art supply store that he set on the kitchen counter without comment. Lily had mentioned once at dinner 6 days prior that she had run out of a specific kind of charcoal pencil. She hadn't said it to anyone in particular. She had mentioned it the way teenagers mention things, not as a request, just as a fact deposited into the room. He had remembered it. He had driven 40 minutes to a store and bought the thing. Lily stood in the kitchen and looked at the box, and then looked at the back door where Richard had already gone back out to the yard. She didn't say anything, but that evening at dinner, she passed him the bread before he asked for it. Margaret noticed. She was quite sure Richard noticed. Neither of them said anything about it. On a Tuesday afternoon in the 4th week, Margaret was in the main barn rearranging the storage shelves. She had taken it upon herself to reorganize them, which Richard had observed without comment, and which she interpreted as approval when she found a cardboard box at the back of a high shelf that she pulled down thinking it was spare parts. It was photographs. She would have put it back immediately. It was clearly personal, clearly private, but the top photograph had slid off when she tipped the box and it lay face up on the barn floor, and she saw it before she could not see it. A woman, young, late 20s maybe, or early 30s. Dark hair, long, and the kind of smile that seems to arrive from somewhere deep and take over the whole face. She was standing in front of the house. This house. Recognizable but younger, with a different paint color, and she was laughing at whoever was behind the camera. Margaret set the box on the shelf. She picked up the photograph and placed it carefully back on top of the others. She was pushing the box to the back of the shelf when Richard's voice came from the barn door. Found the spare parts. She stepped back from the shelf. Not yet. Wrong box. He came in and she watched his eyes go to the shelf, to the box she had put back, and he said nothing. But something crossed his face, not pain, not exactly, but the particular expression of a person who is accustomed to a specific weight and has chosen to live alongside it rather than set it down. Margaret kept her voice even. I didn't look through it, she said. The top one slid out. I'm sorry. A pause. No need to be. She was beautiful. Another pause. Longer. Yes, he said. She was... He crossed the barn and pulled the box down himself and stood with it in his hands. Margaret waited, not speaking. Her name was Caroline, he said. My wife. She died 11 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, Richard. She was 38. He looked at the box. This ranch was her idea, you know. We started it together when we had about 14 acres and 2 cows and less than no money. She had this idea of it, what it could be. He set the box back on the shelf. I just kept building it. After. The barn was very quiet. Outside, a wind came through the grass with a sound like rushing water. I think she would have liked it, Margaret said carefully, the way it looks now, from the kitchen window in the morning. Richard Colton turned and looked at her with those creekwater eyes, and for one unguarded moment she saw the full weight of what he carried. 11 years of a life built for 2 people and occupied by 1. I think so too, he said quietly. He picked up a tool from the workbench and went back to work. Margaret finished organizing the shelves. They worked in the same space for another hour, not talking, the comfortable silence of people who have said enough. That night, Margaret sat on the back porch after Lily went to bed and looked out at the black Texas sky. Massive, the way it can only be over flat land far from cities, and did the kind of thinking that requires dark and space. She thought about Dennis, about the ways she had loved him, which had been real, and the ways he had failed her, which had also been real, and the complicated territory where both of those things coexisted in the same 22 years of marriage. She thought about the relief she had felt after the grief, when she finally let herself feel it, the relief of not being responsible for a man who was quietly drowning and pulling her toward the bottom without telling her. She thought about what it meant to recognize something in another person that you recognized in yourself. Not attraction, necessarily. Or not only that, but the specific recognition of a person who has been alone in a large space for a long time and learned to call it normal. She thought about Lily passing him the bread. She thought about the box of charcoal pencils. She thought about the photograph, that smile, that house, that particular kind of love that leaves a shape in everything around it. I'm not Caroline, she thought. And then, he knows that. That's not what any of this is. The wind moved through the cedar trees at the edge of the yard. And somewhere far out in the dark pasture, a cow called, and was answered. There are things that begin quietly and grow strong without announcing themselves. The way grass grows after a West Texas rain, you don't watch it happen. But one morning you look out and the pasture is green where it was brown. And you understand that the change was taking place all along, underground, where the roots were going deep and silent into the dry ground. It was Boyd Mercer who told her. Not intentionally. Boyd Mercer did nothing unintentionally. He was the most deliberate human being Margaret had encountered in her 44 years. A man who weighed each word with such care that most of them never made it out. But they were fixing the north pasture fence on a Thursday morning in the 6th week, Margaret on one side of the post and Boyd on the other, working in the companionable silence they had developed. And Boyd said, unprompted, looking at the fence post and not at her, "Good thing you stayed." Margaret kept working. "Is it?" He was going to sell. She stopped. "The ranch?" Boyd glanced at her briefly. "Listed it in March, before you came." He set his weight against the post, testing it. "Changed his mind couple weeks after you got here." Margaret straightened up. The early morning light was still low and flat, cutting across the pasture in long shadows. "He didn't tell me that. He wouldn't." Did he say why? Why he was selling? Boyd picked up the wire, worked it through the staple, said nothing for a long moment, the way he did when he was being precise. Then, man can run a place for years and still feel like he's just caretaking it, like it ain't really his anymore. He secured the wire. Don't know how to explain it better than that. Margaret understood it exactly. She thought about Caroline's ranch, Caroline's idea, 14 acres and 2 cows. She asked Richard about it that evening, which was the kind of direct thing she had learned to do more freely in 6 weeks of living alongside his particular brand of honesty. She asked him while they were both in the kitchen after dinner, Lily in her room drawing with the charcoal pencils, Boyd and Caleb gone to the bunkhouse. "You were going to sell," she said. He was washing the cast iron pan. He didn't stop, but his shoulders changed in some small way. "Boyd told you, is it true?" It was true. In March, he set the pan on the counter and dried his hands. Not true anymore. What changed? He turned around. He looked at her the way he always did when she asked a direct question, not evasively but carefully, as if accuracy mattered enough to be worth taking time over. "I got used to things being different than they were," he said. "Got used to dinner at the table. Got used to someone fixing the shelf in the pantry." A pause. "Got used to there being someone here who has a reason to be here." Margaret held his gaze. "That's a complicated thing to say. I know. What does it mean exactly?" He crossed his arms. The kitchen was warm from the evening cooking, and the window above the sink had gone dark. And they were 2 people in a lit room talking about something that had been building for 6 weeks with the patience of people who can't afford another mistake. "I don't know yet exactly," Richard said, "but I know the selling was wrong. I knew it when I signed the listing, and I knew it more after." He uncrossed his arms. "Carolyn wanted this ranch to be a home. I've been running it like a project for 11 years, because it hurt to make it a home," Margaret said quietly. He looked at her. "Yes, and now?" A long silence. Through the ceiling they could hear the faint sound of Lily's music from her room. "Now it hurts less," he said. "That's all I'm certain of. It was not a declaration. It was not even a clear beginning. It was 2 damaged, careful people standing in a warm kitchen confirming to each other that something was happening, which was its own kind of courage. The trouble came from outside. His name was Dale Whitmore, Richard's attorney, who had handled the ranch's listing and who arrived on a Friday morning in a clean white F-250 and a pressed shirt, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the expression of a man who had a specific agenda and the professional composure to pursue it. He was also, Margaret gathered within the first 5 minutes of observing him from the kitchen window, not entirely pleased with the situation he found. She heard the conversation through the back screen door, not meaning to but unable to leave once it had started. "The Hendersons are still interested," Dale Whitmore said. They were on the porch. "They've actually increased the offer, Richard, 120 over asking now. They want to close before fall. I told you I'm not selling." "I know what you told me. I'm telling you what they're offering." A pause. "You've got a responsibility to yourself here. 4,000 acres, Richard. You've been carrying this thing alone for 11. I'm not alone." A beat of silence. "I noticed," Dale said, and his voice had something careful and pointed in it. "Who is she?" "Employee. Housekeeping." "How long?" 6 weeks. Another silence. Longer. "Richard, you've known this woman 6 weeks. I'm aware of how long I've known her. She drove up here in a broken truck from Ohio. She didn't drive up here. She broke down on the road. There's a difference. To a lawyer, that difference is roughly 0. Dale Whitmore's voice was measured, professional, and under the professionalism, there was something Margaret recognized as genuine concern of the kind that still manages to land wrong. "I'm not trying to make assumptions about her character. I'm making observations about your pattern. You are a man of considerable assets who has been isolated out here for a long time, and a woman appeared with a hard luck story and a teenage daughter, and 6 weeks later, you're pulling the ranch off the market." The porch was quiet for a moment. When Richard spoke, His voice had gone very flat and very even in the way that Margaret had come to understand was not the absence of feeling, but the compression of it. "Dale," he said, "go home. Richard. I appreciate that you think you're looking out for me. The answer is no, the ranch is not for sale. If the Hendersons call the office again, you can tell them that." A pause, and you can tell them it's not going to be for sale. A brief silence, the sound of a portfolio being closed. "You're a grown man," Dale Whitmore said. "I know that. He stopped. "To be careful is all. I always am." The sound of boots on porch steps. A truck door. Gravel under tires retreating. Margaret was at the kitchen counter when Richard came back inside. She had her back to him, washing a mug she had already washed. Her face was very carefully arranged. "You heard that," Richard said. "I didn't mean to, I know." He came to the counter and poured himself a coffee and stood beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. "He's not wrong to wonder," he said. Margaret turned to look at him. "I know that. He doesn't know you, from where he's standing." "From where he's standing. I'm a woman who showed up broke in a storm and somehow ended up living in your house," Margaret said steadily. "I understand how that looks. I've thought about it too." Richard looked at her. "I need you to know something," she said, and her voice was clear and direct because she had earned the right to be clear and direct through 3 months of not being clear and direct with herself. "I am not here because of this ranch. I am not here because of what you have or what you're worth. I am here because we needed somewhere to be, and you offered that, and I took it honestly. And whatever else." She stopped. "Whatever else has happened, that's separate. That's not strategy. I don't have the energy for strategy. I barely have the energy for honest." The kitchen was very still. "I know that," Richard said. "How can you know that?" "Because you offered to pay me for the radiator hose," he said. "You offered 3 times. And when I said no, you looked angry about it. People who are running a strategy don't do that." Despite everything, Margaret almost smiled. "I was angry about it. I know. It was the first time I thought you might be worth talking to." She did smile then, a small real one. Richard Colton looked at it as if it were information he was filing carefully. "Dale can think what he wants," he said. "He's paid to be suspicious. That's fine." He set down his mug. "I know what's true here." "What's true here?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment. "That I'm glad the gate was unlocked," he said. The difficulty had not passed. Margaret knew this. Dale Whitmore's visit had illuminated something she had been managing not to look at directly, the asymmetry of the situation. Richard Colton had 4,000 acres and a net worth she couldn't accurately estimate, and a name that carried weight in Taylor County. She had a coffee tin with 11 weeks of saved wages, a teenage daughter, and a truck with a repaired radiator hose. The imbalance was real, and the fact that neither of them had let it matter did not mean the world would extend the same courtesy. There was also Dennis. Not Dennis as a ghost. Margaret had made her peace with Dennis, or enough of it, or as much as a person can, in less than a year. But Dennis as effect, 22 years, a daughter, a life built, choices made without full information. The particular education of a marriage that ends in revelation. She was not the same person she had been before it, which was sometimes a relief, and sometimes an ache. She sat with all of this. She sat with it honestly, which was new, and she found that she was still here, still choosing to be here. Not because she had no options, she had some now, small and real, but because she was choosing this. That felt different than anything had felt in a long time. Lily's crisis came on a Thursday. It came the way Lily's crises always came, not announced but sudden, like a pressure that had been building invisibly until it found a seam. Margaret came home from the feed store in Abilene to find her daughter sitting on the back porch steps with her phone in her lap and her face pale and closed. "What happened?" Lily handed her the phone. On the screen was a text from a girl named Brianna, who had been Lily's best friend in Ohio since 6th grade. The text was long. Margaret read it. The summary: Brianna's mother had told Brianna what had happened with the Callaway finances. The town knew, of course. Towns always know. The text was not cruel, not intentionally, but it was the particular cruelty of someone who has decided that honesty is the same as kindness. It said things like, "We didn't know it was that bad, and my mom said you had to sell the house, and why didn't you just tell me? And at the end, I hope Texas is okay, I miss you." Lily's face was the face of someone who had been seen in a way they hadn't chosen. Margaret sat down on the step beside her. "I know," she said. Lily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. It was the first time in 3 months she had done that without being asked. "I don't want people to feel sorry for us," she said. "I know, I'm not embarrassed. You don't want pity," Margaret said. "That's different from embarrassment. That's dignity." A long silence. A mockingbird was running through its repertoire in the cedar tree by the fence. "Are we going to be okay?" Lily asked. She said it quietly, without the edge of challenge she had used in March and April. She said it the way she had said it when she was small and there was a thunderstorm, not doubting, but needing confirmation. "Yes," Margaret said, and this time she meant it in a way that had evidence behind it. "We are going to be okay." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Is it because of him? Because of the ranch?" "It's because of us," Margaret said. "The ranch is part of the landscape. We're the story." Lily lifted her head. "That's kinda good," she said. "I thought so." The mockingbird reached the end of its repertoire and started over. The afternoon light lay long and gold across the Texas pasture. Lily's hand found Margaret's and held it, and they sat there until Richard Colton's truck came up the drive at 5:30, and the day moved forward. What Dale Whitmore had called a pattern, and what Boyd Mercer had simply called a good thing, and what Lily Calloway, 17 years old, had recognized before anyone else admitted it, was not strategy, was not desperation, was not the convenient fiction of two lonely people in proximity. It was something quieter and harder to argue with. Two people who had each spent years maintaining the appearance of being fine, recognizing in each other the specific effort that required, and deciding slowly, at the pace of people who have paid for rushing, that they didn't want to keep doing it alone. Summer in West Texas is not subtle. By June, the temperature was sitting in the mid-90s by 10 in the morning, and the light had that particular quality of the high season, white and flat and pressing, the kind of light that makes everything crisp-edged and offers no softness. The ranch ran at full capacity. 2 additional seasonal hands had joined Boyd and Caleb for the summer work, and the kitchen was feeding 6 people most mornings, which Margaret had taken on as a logistical challenge, and was managing with a competence that surprised her. Though in retrospect it shouldn't have. She had run a household and a family, and a small catering side business for 15 years before the debt had swallowed everything. She was good at this. She had forgotten she was good at things. Lily was finishing her first semester at the Abilene school with grades she had no right to achieve given the circumstances, according to her new English teacher, who had called Margaret in late May to say that her daughter had written an essay about displacement and belonging that she was, with the family's permission, submitting to a regional writing competition. Margaret had said yes. She had hung up and cried for 10 minutes in the laundry room, quietly and completely. When she came out, Richard was in the kitchen, and he looked at her with the complete attention he brought to things, and she said, "Lily's teacher called," and he said, "Good news," and she said, "Very," and he nodded, and that was all, and it was sufficient. The conversation happened on a Sunday evening in late June on the back porch, with the sun going down over the west pasture and painting the clouds in colors that had no reasonable name. Richard had brought out 2 beers without asking, the way he had started doing on Sunday evenings, and they sat in the porch chairs and looked at the end of the day. They had been talking off and on about Lily, the essay, the school, the possibility of her applying to U.S. Austin in 2 years, which Richard had mentioned because a friend of his sat on the alumni board, and which he had mentioned with the casualness of someone who had been thinking about it for a while and was releasing it casually to test the temperature. Margaret had said thank you and not deflected, which meant she was no longer deflecting. Then they were quiet for a while, comfortable in it, and the sky went from orange to pink to the first pale purple of evening. "I want to say something," Richard said. He said it looking at the horizon, not at her. "All right," she said. "I'm not a man I don't talk much about things. You know that." He turned the beer bottle in his hands. "It's not shyness. It's more that I've learned that most things I have to say are things I should be sure about before I say them. Because I don't take them back well." Margaret waited. "I'm sure about this," he said. She turned to look at him. He was looking at the horizon still, but his profile in the low evening light was very clear. That jaw, the silver hair at his temple, the particular stillness of a man who has decided to stop being careful. "I'm sure that this ranch is more itself than it's been in 11 years, he said. "I'm sure that I haven't sat on this porch on a Sunday evening in longer than I can remember without it feeling like something I was doing to pass time. I'm sure that your daughter is the best thing to happen to Caleb's conversational development since he learned to talk." He paused. "And I'm sure that whatever this is, whatever we're doing here, I don't want it to be temporary. I don't want you to be planning for somewhere else." The sky had deepened to a full violet, the first stars just beginning to press through. Margaret set her beer down on the porch rail. She thought about Ohio, about the house she had sold, about Dennis in the recliner on Valentine's Day. She thought about the storm, the gate, the wet gravel drive. She thought about the towel and the soap on the nightstand that she hadn't asked for. She thought about charcoal pencils in a box from an art supply store 40 minutes away. "When I drove out of Ohio," she said slowly, "I didn't have a plan. I had a direction. I was heading toward something because I couldn't stay where I was." She looked at her hands. "I've spent most of my life going toward things that turned out to be different than I thought. I'm careful now. About what I say I'm sure of." "That's fair," Richard said. "But I'm sure of this much," she continued. "I stopped planning to leave somewhere around the 3rd week. I stopped thinking of this as temporary somewhere around the 4th. And I stopped pretending that was only about the job somewhere around." She looked at him. "The Sunday you came back from Abilene with charcoal pencils." Richard Colton turned from the horizon and looked at her. In the evening light, his face was open in a way she had not seen it before. Not unguarded exactly, but chosen. He had chosen to let her see it. "That's good enough for me," he said. "It's a beginning," she said. "Not a conclusion. Beginnings are what I'm asking for." She picked up her beer. He picked up his. The last of the sun dropped below the ridge, and the sky went deep and full, and the stars came out one by one over the Texas pasture. "Okay," Margaret said. "Okay," Richard said. They sat with it, the word between them small and quiet and enormous, and the night came on. 3 days later, Margaret drove to Abilene alone. She went to a bank and opened a Texas account and transferred the contents of the coffee tin into it. She went to a second-hand shop on North First Street and bought 2 picture frames. She went to a grocery store and bought the specific ingredients for a birthday cake. Because Lily's birthday was Thursday, and she was going to be 18, which was the kind of number that required proper cake. She sat in the truck in the parking lot for a moment before driving back. She called her sister in Cleveland, who she had not called in 2 months, and who answered on the second ring and said "Maggie" in the voice of someone who has been waiting. She told her sister where she was. Not everything, not yet, but the shape of it, the broad facts. Texas, a ranch, a job, Lily doing well, a man who was decent. Her sister said, "Decent how?" Margaret thought about it. "Decent, the way that's rare," she said. Her sister was quiet for a moment. "Are you happy?" Margaret looked out the truck windshield at the West Texas afternoon. The flat heat, the white sky, the caliche dust on every surface, the specific stark beauty of a landscape that makes no apologies for what it is. "I think I'm starting to remember what that feels like," she said. Which might be better, actually, better than just being happy. Remembering it from the inside. Her sister said that sounded right. They talked for 20 minutes. Margaret drove back to the ranch. Lily's birthday was on a Thursday. Margaret made the cake, chocolate, 3 layers. The kind Lily had requested every year since she was 7. and Richard came in from the south pasture at noon, which he did not usually do, and Boyd and Caleb came to the table at 5:30, and Boyd had, apparently of his own initiative, acquired a small wrapped package that turned out to contain a set of ink pens that Lily immediately identified as the professional grade she had been looking at online. Boyd, under the weight of Lily's astonished gratitude, turned the color of a brick and said figured you'd use him, and then focused intensely on his fork. Caleb had made a playlist and connected it to the kitchen speaker, and it was enthusiastically wrong in multiple respects, but nobody said so. Richard sat at the head of the table, where he always sat, but which tonight felt different, felt claimed, felt like a head of table that had people at it, and he was quiet in his way, but his way had warmth in it that Margaret saw clearly now. She saw it when he told Lily that UT Austin had a well-regarded fine arts program. She saw it when he refilled her glass without being asked. She saw it when Lily blew out the 18 candles on the cake, and in the half-second before the room filled with noise. He looked across the table at Margaret with an expression she had no trouble reading. This, it said. This is what it was supposed to be. Margaret held his gaze, and something settled in her, not the restless energy of surviving, but the quieter, deeper sensation of arriving. Of being, for the first time in longer than she could name, in the right place at the right time, and knowing it. In July, she repainted the guest room. She hadn't been asked to. She had bought the paint on the Abilene run and done it over 2 days while Richard was in the south pasture. And when she was done, she moved her things from the dresser back in and stood in the center of the room that was now a color she had chosen, and felt the specific satisfaction of a person who has put their mark on a place with the expectation of staying. Richard came in that evening and looked at the walls, a soft, dusty sage green, and was quiet for a moment. "Good color," he said. "I thought so." He looked at her. "Permanent," he said. "Not a question. Permanent," she confirmed. He nodded once, the way Boyd nodded, the full weight of approval compressed to a single gesture, and went to wash up for dinner. Caleb Sutton, who was 26 and enthusiastic, and had the perceptiveness of a golden retriever in most matters but occasionally surprised everyone, said to Margaret in the barn one August morning while they were both doing different things, "You know, when you first came, Boss didn't smile. Not once in 3 weeks. I kept track." Margaret glanced at him. "How often does he now?" Caleb considered. "Couple times a week," he said. Which for him is approximately the same as laughing constantly. Margaret turned back to what she was doing and did not let him see her expression, which was doing something she preferred to keep to herself. "Mind your business, Caleb," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said cheerfully, and went back to work. It was on a morning in late August, 10 weeks after the storm, 3 months after the locked gate that had been unlocked, 5 months after Margaret Calloway had driven away from a sold house in Ohio with $260 and a direction, that Richard asked her to walk the south fence line with him. It was early. The heat was already present but not yet punishing, and the light was the low, clear gold of the Texas morning that Margaret had come to understand was the best part of the day and worth getting up for. They walked in the comfortable silence of people who no longer need to fill the space between them, along the fence line that ran toward the creek, through grass that was green after a July rain, with the cattle moving slowly in the distance and the sky enormous and uninterrupted above them. At the creek, Richard stopped. The water was low. It usually was by August, but it was running clear over smooth limestone, the way small Texas creeks do when they aren't in a hurry. He stood on the bank and looked at it, and Margaret stood beside him, and after a while he said, "Caroline picked this spot." Margaret was still. She wanted the house here, actually, on the rise above the creek. I told her the rise was better for the main barn because of the sight lines. He put his hands in his pockets. She said, "Fine, put the barn there, but promise me the creek stays wild. Don't fence it or grade it or run anything through it." "You kept that," Margaret said. "Kept that." They stood for another minute. The water went over the limestone with its small, continuous sound. She would have had opinions about you, Richard said. Strong ones. She had opinions about everything. A pause. Good opinions, I mean. She would have liked you. The way you handed me that wrench the first morning. She would have said, she's a worker, Richard, don't let her leave. Margaret felt her throat tighten. She sounds like she was something. She was everything for a while, he said, and then she was gone. And the ranch kept going because that's what ranches do. And I kept going because that's what you do. And 11 years passed. He turned and looked at her. I'm not confusing you with her. I want you to know that. I'm not looking for a replacement. I know the difference between holding on and moving forward. I know you do, Margaret said. I know. I just wanted you to know that she's here, that this place has her in it. And I wanted you to hear it from me on purpose instead of finding it in a box on a shelf. Margaret looked at the creek. She thought of Dennis, of the ways he was present too, not as a wound anymore, but as a fact. As 22 years of a life and a daughter who laughed exactly like him and drew the way neither of them could and was turning into someone remarkable. Dennis is in Lily, she said. The laugh, the stubbornness, the way she pretends she doesn't care about things she obviously cares about deeply. She paused. I don't want to erase him either. He was part of what made her, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. Richard nodded. The creek went on. So we carry them, he said, both of them, and we still go forward. That's what you do, Margaret said. That's what people do. He looked at her with the full, open expression that still surprised her when she saw it, because she hadn't expected it from a man who kept so much internal. He put his hand out, not dramatically, not with ceremony, just a hand, open, offered, and she took it, and they stood at the edge of Caroline's Creek in the August morning, with the cattle in the distance and the sky full and blue above them, and both of them carrying what they carried, and both of them still here. The county fair came to Abilene in September. Lily won second place in the student art division with a charcoal drawing that she had titled simply Morning, Colton Ranch. It showed the view from the kitchen window, the east pasture, the early light, the fence lines running to the horizon, rendered with the precision of someone who had looked at the same thing every day for 4 months and learned exactly what it meant. The judge's card said, "Exceptional emotional clarity for an artist this age. The subject is ordinary. The feeling is not." Richard framed the judge's card and hung it in the kitchen, which Lily pretended to be annoyed by, and which she clearly loved. Boyd said, "Looks right," which was, from Boyd, a standing ovation. Caleb said, "You should do the South Barn next. I think that'd be real." And Lily said, "Caleb," and he said, "Right, yes, minding my business." Margaret stood in the kitchen and looked at the framed card and the drawing beside it, her daughter's hand, and these fields, and this light, and felt the particular fullness of a life that has been broken and rebuilt, and is now, finally, something you would choose. Not something you fell into or fled to or survived, something you would choose. She turned from the wall and found Richard watching her from the kitchen doorway. "She's going to be good," he said. "Really good." "I know," Margaret said. "She's been good for a while. I just needed things to be quiet enough to see it." He crossed the kitchen and stood next to her, and they both looked at the drawing, the view that was also their view, the light that came through their window every morning. "Thank you," Margaret said. She said it directly, the way she had learned to do everything in this place for the gate being unlocked. Richard was quiet for a moment. "I forgot to lock it," he said. "That's the truth. I forgot that morning." Margaret turned to look at him. "You forgot? 12 years of locking it, and I forgot that one morning." He looked at the drawing. Boyd said, "God moves in mysterious ways." I told him I didn't want to hear theology from a man who hadn't been to church since Clinton was president. Margaret laughed, a real one, the kind that came from the place below the ribs where the real ones live. Richard Colton looked at her laughing in his kitchen in front of his future stepdaughter's drawing and allowed himself, slowly, the particular relief of a man who has been right about something that mattered. The proposal happened in October, on the back porch, on a Sunday evening, in the manner of all the significant things between them, quietly, without performance, as two adults who had earned the right to mean what they said. He did not go down on one knee. He sat in the porch chair he always sat in and turned to her and said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that whenever you say, nothing here changes. You're here because you belong here, not because of what you answer." She turned to him. "Will you marry me?" he said. "Not because it fixes anything or solves anything. Because I want to go forward with you. Because this ranch needs someone who calls it home, and so do I." The stars were out. The cattle were quiet in the dark pasture. Somewhere in the house, Lily was playing music. "Yes," Margaret said. "I will." He reached over and took her hand the way he had at the creek, simply and without ceremony, and they sat with the enormous, ordinary weight of it. "Lily's going to have opinions," Margaret said. "I know, I already asked her." Margaret turned to look at him. "You asked my daughter before you asked me? Seemed right." He paused. She said, and I'm quoting, obviously, "What took you so long?" Margaret pressed her free hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. "She also said I should know," Richard continued, "that she's going to take up significant wall space in the house with her art, and that she requires chocolate birthday cake every year without exception, and that she intends to apply to UT Austin and expects a recommendation letter from your alumni contact." She said all that, in that order. Margaret laughed until her eyes were wet, and Richard Colton sat beside her and held her hand and let it happen. And the Texas night was enormous and dark and full of stars, and the gate to Colton Ranch stood open at the end of the drive. The way it had on the night a storm came in and changed everything, the way it would keep standing, open, and not by accident but by choice. Some storms leave destruction. Some leave the ground ready for something it wasn't ready for before. Margaret Calloway had driven into West Texas with a broken truck and $260 and a daughter who had stopped talking about the future. She stayed because she had to at first, then because she chose to, then because choosing and belonging had stopped being different things. And the land, which had been waiting, which had always been waiting, the way dry ground waits for rain, received her, and held,